But
Yes.
I think actually it's not in the Danish psyche. Actually, politics is quite important, and politicians are someone to be. They are representative of the people, so they have been given a very important mandate. And if they don't do their job, they're kind of held to account in a different way. And probably the tabloids are not as vicious in Denmark as well. I mean, I haven't lived there for 30 years, but that's how.
No, well, they won't be, because Rupert Murdoch doesn't have any media in Denmark. You can track stuff, whether it's climate change or the rise of the far right, to the countries where Rupert Murdoch has toehold. So it's Australia, America and the United Kingdom that are suffering from the worst excesses of this sort of thing. You have tributates like Viktor Orban, but the nature of a Murdoch-infused, infiltrated, influenced media is you don't notice it when you're in it, Rikke. That's the point. It's like a boiling frog.
Yeah. And I mean, I suppose, and I think that, I mean, he gets elected on those qualities. I don't think he really got elected because people didn't know Johnson before he came into his, into becoming a prime minister.
Yeah.
I mean, so there was a really good track record of getting away with it. He's always done that.
I suppose maybe you can vote for someone who's got a history of getting away with it, because it's compelling. Say what you like about him, he gets away with it. Let's put him in charge of everything, and then he'll get away with that as well.
Exactly.
Someone's just said it's like putting Michelle in Yorkshire. It's like putting Derek Trotter in charge of Parliament. But Derek, and the problem is those of us that don't find him likeable overlook the fact that so many people do. And I'm lucky in a sense in that way, because I did like him briefly in the sort of last half of the last decade. The decade before last, actually, up until that 2008 mayoral election, I kind of fell for his spiel because I wasn't really paying attention. And it's all very well us sitting here conducting a political post-mortem, but all we're really doing is expressing our confusion at people who still fall for the spiel. You never did, but I did.
No, but is it not also something about, I'm kind of a teacher background, is it not also something about how we question authority in the class system? So how we don't question authority in the class system, in fact. And again, the Danish system is very, very different, just in terms of kind of, we haven't got school uniforms, we don't line up, we call teachers by our first name,
Interesting.
So it's much more equitable in terms of authority, and I think there's something.
Well,
about
you recognise that. You recognise equitable. You recognise a fundamental equality that people like Jacob Rees-Mogg would simply never have been heard of if it was practised in this country, and to a lesser extent Johnson. And the idea that this school in Windsor can produce double-figure number of MPs because by coincidence it somehow attracts people possessed of such an epic skill set and talent base that they are the best qualified people to be Prime Minister in every generation since the 17th century or the 18th century. It is actually comical and laughable, and perhaps you need to be an outsider to appreciate the full scale of the absurdity. Won't some gift the gifty gears to see ourselves as others see us? Dominic Ellis is here now with your headlines. 11:36 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Paul writes, I liked his cavalier attitude once. Now I detest the despicable Chancellor. Fair play to you, Paul. I found the line. It's only about the fourth or fifth line of the speech. That must be why I missed it. I was adjusting my hair. They changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now. What does he mean when he says that? The baton will be handed over in what has unexpectedly turned out to be a relay race. They changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now. And then he embarked upon the sort of speech you'd expect a man who'd been Prime Minister for 10 years and delivered untold riches and benefits to his country to deliver, rather than a man who's been Prime Minister for 3 years and presided over calumny after catastrophe after disaster. What did he mean when he said that? They changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now. And I'll tell you something else that intrigues me. The phone lines are open, by the way, if you want to join in. It's one of those odd mornings where my ponderings are more than enough to see us through till 1 o'clock. But I do like listening to you. So if you can answer any of these questions, they're not rhetorical. What was he talking about when he said they changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now? What do you think he was talking about? I remember they tried to change the rules when Owen Paterson was caught with his trousers down, metaphorically speaking. They tried to change the rules to let their crony off the hook. They tried to rip up the whole parliamentary standards book after Patterson broke it, that I think was probably the beginning of the end, wasn't it? They did what? Jacob Rees-Mogg was put in charge of it, inevitably. And when I talk about the shallowness of the pool from which Liz Truss is picking her cabinet, it's important to point out that Jacob Rees-Mogg is still in it. That's how shallow it is. He was put in charge of the Save Owen Paterson campaign, which was the beginning of the end for Boris Johnson. But she's got so little talent to choose from, and he is one of the best loyal liars. That's what you need, loyal liars. So he'll probably get a job in the new cabinet. But that's the only thing I can think about where rules were changed. What do you think he's talking about there when he says the baton will be handed over in what has unexpectedly turned out to be a relay race? They changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now. 0345, seriously, 0345 6060 973. We've had the claim that he fixed social care blown up by one caller. Feel free to add to that. He managed to say thank you to his dog, but not to his wife, which seemed characteristic, I thought. I don't know whether you picked up on that, because I've got the transcript in front of me now. I'm doing all my own research on the programme today. He said thank you to his dog, but not to his wife. That seems to me to be the mark of the man. Don't you agree? So who did you say thank you to today during that ludicrous speech? Well, my dog. What about your wife? Oh, no, forgot her. Sorry. Yeah. The police numbers, there's some fairly questionable claims there. 13,790 more police on the streets. I'm sure that bit's true. But this is a government, this is a party that between 2010 and 2019, to the best of my knowledge, got rid of about 20,500 police officers. So he's boasting about a shortfall when his party came into office to when he left office. He's boasting about a shortfall of 12,000 officers. There are 12,000 fewer police officers now than there were when the Conservatives came to power in 2010. So I don't think he can have that one, can he? 50,000 nurses by the end of this parliament. That's 50,000 new nurses. It's gone up 23 and just shy of 24,000 since he came into office, but that's not even halfway to the figure that's needed. Are they going to be able to find 26,247 new nurses by 2024, by December 2024? And how many of them are going to be coming from overseas? Which is absolutely fine by me, but an awful lot of people who voted for Boris Johnson felt there were too many foreign people working in the NHS. So that is a questionable achievement, a questionable claim. 6,000 more GPs by 2025. He didn't mention that. That was another government pledge. That figure has gone up by 738 since the end of December 2019. And how many of them are full-time or part-time, I do not know. How many, here's a little quiz for you, Boris Johnson fans. Of the 40 new hospitals that he said would be built by the end of the decade, how many were set to be entirely new hospitals? In fact, I'm going to be cheeky now. I'm going to ask Malik, who's in Bristol and waiting to talk about something completely different. Malik, would you like to have a guess at how many of the 40 new hospitals Boris Johnson pledged to build by the end of the decade and was still boasting about earlier today, how many of them are or will be entirely new hospitals?
That's going to be a zero.
No.
Zero.
No, you ingrate. You hater. You remoaning lefty. 3 out of 40 hospitals will actually be, if they get built, entirely new hospitals. I think one of the 40 opened last year, but not one of the brand new ones. A further 6 are currently under construction. So what the hell he's talking about when he's still boasting about 40 new hospitals is beyond me. But that's not why you rang in. Tell me why you rang in and what you want to say, Malik.
I think Boris, I love calling him that. I think he does have a point when he says that we changed the rules midway.
Go on.
Because he's always been like this. He's been like this when he was elected mayor of London. He's been an MP. He saw his chance with Brexit. He's going all over the country in that bus, covered with a lie, and he's just lied through his teeth all this time. He's had 50 different scandals.
Yes.
During his time as the prime minister, and all of a sudden, because he let his mate, have a job, and just because he's a there's a bit of sexual assault occasionally.
Yeah.
All of a sudden now he has to leave the job. That's not fair. He's always been like this. He's always done things like
so
that.
That's what he means. This would not have ended any other premiership. He can kind of ignore the cumulative effect of everything he's done. Even if you only start with Patterson, there's probably 20 to 30 things on that list. Or go back to the proroguing, the 3 Ps, proroguing, parties, Patterson are the 3 biggies for me. But the idea that he thinks he's going solely because of the Chris Pincher affair. And that's not fair, because what did I do? All I did was give a job to a bloke who's a bit handsy. That's not the end of the world. So that's what he thinks. That's the rule he's talking about, perhaps.
Yeah, so he's been hard done by. I think you're
right.
What's the big deal?
I think you're right. I think that's the narcissist in him, isn't it? That's the idea of everything now is dedicated to exoneration or exculpation, and that is how he does it. He goes, that's all I'm being done for. Whereas obviously most of the 62 members of government, over a third of his entire administration who walked the plank, were not walking the plank about the Chris Pincher affair. They were walking the plank about the culmination. That vote of confidence that he squeaked through happened before the Chris Pincher affair emerged, but he needs to construct a narrative that allows him to cling to his own self-regard, and that narrative is they've all pretended to care passionately about that one incident, whereas the real narrative, the truth, is that it was a straw that broke the camel's back. Not even a necessarily massive straw in the great scheme of things, but enough to break the camel's back. That's the whole point of the figure of speech, isn't it?
Yeah, because the plug hole's in the sink and you've had a leak. And it's just been leaking all this time, and then all of a sudden it overflowed.
The last drop causes the ceiling downstairs to collapse. Yeah, I think you're right.
It's like the hospital roofs, by the way.
Yeah, well, I've lost count of how many hospital roofs are set to fall in because they're unfit for purpose. But at least he's building 40 new hospitals, brackets, actually 3, close brackets. None of which, as far as I'm aware, have actually been completed. But that's not going to stop Boris Johnson boasting about it in his farewell speech, is it? There's one phone. You can grab Malik's phone. Thank you, Malik. You can grab his phone line if you're quick. But before that, I've got some important business to do. This is thanks to Nick, who's up in Darlington. There is a park in Darlington called Skern Park. I'm not familiar with it, but there is currently a man wheeling his bin around Skern Park, cleaning up all the rubbish, listening to this programme on his portable radio. And while I do not know your name, sir, I would like to wish you an extremely good morning and thank you for tuning in to this radio programme. So if you're currently cleaning up in Skern Park in Darlington, if I had any music to play, I would dedicate the next song to you. 11:49 is the time, and on we go. Listen. It's hard to choose one's words carefully, but I think loyalty to a brother from Rachel Johnson is not an entirely inadmirable attribute, even if the brother is as irredeemably awful as hers. You know, I sometimes feel sorry for my sister, who thankfully has never asked to defend me in public, but I can't imagine it's much fun to be doing that. So try not to be too horrible to her on the old social medias. Fill your boots with the other fella, though. I'm not quite sure who he was, but Boris Johnson was incredibly hardworking. That's Joe Lycett levels of comedy. Lee's in Manchester. Lee, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James. How are you?
I'm all right, actually. I'll tell you a secret, shall I, Lee?
Go on.
Whenever anybody asks me how I am from a sort of work-life point of view, since 2016, my response is generally, well, great for business, bad for the soul. And there we are. You know, it's for 3 hours every day, I've got the best job in the world. And then for the other 21 hours, of course, I'm a citizen of these islands, and all of the repercussions and ramifications of that reality weigh heavily upon my scrawny shoulders. But thank you for asking, Lee.
I see where you're coming from with that. Well, it's just following on. I think you mentioned something earlier about why do people who know that Boris Johnson lies still support him?
Yeah.
I've got a bit of theory in this, because I've got friends stroke acquaintances that will defend him no matter what. They know he's a barefaced liar, and he admits it.
Yeah.
And it's usually the same spiel that, well, it would be worse under Labour because the right-wing media portray that Labour would be worse, even though if Labour are in charge of the country with the debt levels as it is now, the right-wing media would demand a coup d'etat for Labour if they were responsible for that. Then you get lines like, well, the best leaders take risks, even though they lie. At least Boris Johnson's taking risks,
right?
And then you get them to try and get them to elaborate, and they just go back to the whataboutery with Labour, or imagine, but Corbyn, Keir Starmer, etc. And then when you get them on the ropes and they've got nothing else to utter, they utter the same line that the first call you took when Boris Johnson was announced as a Tory leader.
Yeah.
They utter that line. Well, he annoys the likes of you.
Yeah.
And that's all they've got. Boris Johnson is a lad that annoys all the wokes and all the liberals, and that's why I'll support him. And he's a better alternative than what Labour could ever offer.
We need
got no evidence.
I think you might be right. And I've already seen people saying Liz Truss is upsetting all the right people. And it's a phrase that we've all used. Well, I may have used it. You probably haven't. You're too clever. But you can understand the appeal of it when you see people having a... on Sunday, you might have said Joe Lycett has annoyed all the right people. But when you're talking about politics and the people that this politician is annoying are the people who care about the truth and standards and ethics, it's a very, very odd thing to celebrate, isn't it? It's a very odd thing to celebrate.
Exactly. You're talking about the leader of the country, supposed to be running the country. I think I want more in my Prime Minister than somebody that just upsets a load of liberals and a load of woke people. I want somebody to actually run the country and run it to the best of their ability.
Yeah, well, he did run it to the best of his ability. He did run it to the best of his ability, Lee.
True.
That's the problem. Yeah, I mean, it's a funny one, isn't it? It's because I rarely get beyond that. I love him because he upsets people like you. So, well, what do you mean? What do you get out of it? If you're sinking, imagine we're on a ship together and the ship is just about to sink beneath the waves and I'm going, oh, this is awful. Are you really standing there going, no, it isn't? It's great. You're really upset. We're all about to drown and you really hate it. I mean, what does it mean, Lee? What does it mean?
Exactly. And then it just goes back to you try and get to, because I'm one of these, I don't mind being educated. I usually try and say to my friends that do support Boris Johnson, okay, tell me what he's done that's good. Yeah. And there's always, they'll say, well, he delivered Brexit. Yeah, but there's issues with Northern Ireland, issues with trade deals, there's issues with passport control. Yeah, but he still delivered it.
But over half the country don't want it anymore.
Exactly.
So it's an odd thing to boast about.
Like you mentioned the vaccine rollout. Like you said, we're now gone down in the standings.
Fifth. No, we were ahead of the curve. We were ahead of Europe from, and I'll get this right because I think it's important. I think we had about 4 or 5 months when we could realistically have claimed, because it was true to say it, that we were doing better than the rest of Europe. I mean, the first country to approve a COVID vaccine, certainly, and then from the 8th of December 2020, so you've got December, January, February, March, April, 5 months, and then by May 2021, we'd been overtaken by other countries, and we now sit at about 5th, although it's a fluctuating line. So you say the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, that would be true for 5 of the last... I don't know, nearly, say...
18 months, 2 years.
Yeah, bit just shy of 2 years. It would be untrue for more of that period than it was true for. So that's not an achievement either, really.
No, but that's what they hold on to. And then when you've got these supporters on the ropes, and you try and they just say, well, it'd be better at least it's better now than what Labour would have done, because Labour would have still kept us in lockdown. It's like, but you've got no evidence about that.
Don't need evidence, do I? I just need something to shout. It's like we've turned the whole country into PMQs, and as long as you've got some gibberish that like you're Jonathan Gullis, that ludicrous individual who just sort of sits...
the veil.
And he just shouts all sorts of nonsense, like, at Keir Starmer, and because it's noisy and it's... he's frightened of silence. He sort of comes away thinking he's scored a zinger, scored a hit, and that's what the country's been turned into. Doesn't matter what you're shouting, as long as you've got something to shout. He got Brexit done, and the Prime Minister has turned us into a sort of, I don't know what it would be, into a sort of fight outside a nightclub at chucking out time.
Yeah, I agree.
Happy days. Happy days. Thank you, Lee. Mind how you go. Speaking of nightclubs, Manchester, land of my youth, where I did all my early clubbing. 11:55 is the time. Alistair is in Chipping Norton. Alistair, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I want to answer the question that you posed about the appeal of Boris Johnson. And in particular, I want to ask, why do some people think that Boris Johnson is a great orator?
Yes.
I mean, this morning on the radio, I heard somebody say that he was the Aston Martin of oratory. And, I mean, personally, I think his speeches are just full of extravagant flannel and bluster, but they do contain some features which I think delude number of people into believing that actually in them there is some kind of substance. So I listened to his speech this morning, and I tried to make a list of those features, and I think you can find them in most of his speeches. Now, the first one is this enormous energy of the delivery. You know, he is 100% confident. There's no qualification. There's no nuance. There's no complexity at all. He keeps it simple. Secondly, I do think that his accent, his posh public school accent, has an effect on some people. If Definitely. You take, I mean, so you often use the term forelock tugging. Well, I think that forelock tugging is part of the DNA of some sections of the population, and that may have an effect.
Yes.
Next, it's patriotic white noise. You always get that, and you got that in the speech this morning. Britain is once again standing tall in the world. Next, it's throwing.
That makes people feel good. Makes people feel briefly good about themselves, their country, their home, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly, and he knows that. He absolutely knows that. And then throwing impressive figures about. Now, the huge confidence which he throws these impressive figures about makes it less likely that people will check up on them. The next thing, and I think this is really important, jokes that make people laugh. And that appeals to another section of people who want to be entertained rather than informed.
Right.
I mean, the jokes about Larry and Dylan and bouncing about in his space hopper that we got. And I'm sure there's a lot more, but finally I identified classical references, you know, that make him appear scholarly and wise, like the one about Titinius this morning.
It wasn't Titinius, actually. That's the only thing. That's the only thing I'm going to correct you on your otherwise absolutely scintillating analysis. It was one that begins with C. The one who went back to his Cincinnatus, is it?
I don't know. Ending in IUS.
Well, it's like Rees-Mogg and his dictionary of cute quotations, isn't it? That he even talks about having on his desk, because you can convince people not privileged enough to have had very expensive educations that you're very clever by dropping in relatively shallow references to things that they haven't heard of before. I'll tell you what, T.S. Eliot once said, Alistair, people can't cope with too much reality. I think that underpins a lot of what you've just said.
Yes, absolutely.
And there it is. And when you put it like that, two things happen. Number one, it is clear why people will lap it up, whether it's the forelock tugging element or the preference of entertainment over information and distraction from reality being a more attractive proposition than explanation of reality. And number two, it is so formulaic, so plodding, so predictable.
It's absolutely formulaic. It's a recipe.
Yes, it's exactly a recipe.
I don't think people realise that, actually.
Nor do I.
He's ticking the points off as he's composing his speech.
And it's also pedestrian. Once you pull back, you're like Toto in The Wizard of Oz, you see. That's what you've done in this phone call. You have pulled back the curtain to reveal the blustering old geezer pulling all the levers and the buttons to create the idea of omnipotence.
Right.
Thank you, Alistair.
Cheers.
And that's from the heart of Cameron country as well. In Chipping Norton.
Bye.
Cheerio. It's coming up to 12 noon. We could carry on with this. We could carry on with it all day. We may. I shall consult my crack team of colleagues during the break, during the news, something happened on the telly yesterday that I can't stop thinking about. And I honestly don't know what to think of it. The Daily Mail has already run a competition in which you could win your energy bills. That's pretty grim, but it means somebody somewhere has got more money today than they had yesterday. I mean, whether or not you phrase it as an energy bill victory, but on the telly yesterday, they had an actual wheel of fortune, which viewers would spin in the hope of winning their energy bills. 4 minutes after 12 is the time. I think we'll wait until we've got a little bit of meat on the bones of what Liz Truss is going to do, which of her election pledges she abandons first, before we get stuck into her and her regime. We'll keep an eye. Theo will no doubt keep me up to speed with any developments with regard to appointments, but they're both at Balmoral now, where the Queen is working from home. Quite understandably and rightly. All the research shows productivity is not affected at all. In fact, in many cases, it improves when people work from home. Jacob Rees-Mogg, no doubt, will be furious. But then again, he's already lied to the Queen, hasn't he, in the last few years? So, who cares? I'm going to talk about something completely different. Something really weird on the telly yesterday. And you know, partly, again, this is probably Joe Lycett's fault. We're going to have to stop. Keith, will you keep count of how many times we're mentioning Joe Lycett? Also, I didn't think he'd be doing any media yesterday. Because often the best thing to do in those sort of circumstances is just to watch the fire you started and go roast some chestnuts perhaps on it or warm your hands up. But he's on tour at the moment, so obviously he was doing media. And I only noticed just before coming off air, by the time I DM'd him to say, hey, come on the big show, why are you appearing with all these minnows and also rands? Come on the big show. And by the time I DM'd him, we were pretty much off air. But we do have to stop mentioning him all the time, because now every time some sort of absolute balloon comes out with commentary upon the Conservative government that is absurd, transparently ridiculous, while a journalist sits there nodding. And I'm not that critical of the journalists that do it, by the way. I think that Laura Koonsberg could do a lot better, but, you know, that's what you have to do to get those sort of gigs at the BBC. Generally speaking, you have to work within the format, the established format, and Lycett blew up the format on Sunday morning, because normally you have to sit there, like I did with Andrea Leadsom, when she was telling Pascal Lamy, the Director General of the World Trade Organisation, why he didn't really understand as much about the World Trade Organisation as she did. And I think he was doing sort of curly-whirly cuckoo type symbols. Certainly, if the footage is still available, he was absolutely staggered. But I had to sit there going, oh, okay, yes, thank you. Pascal, would you like to respond to that? So we're all part of the problem, and the only alternative you've got is not to have any of these people at all on your programme, which is not an option that everyone can take. I'm not under any illusions about that. I'm lucky that I can do 3 hours of radio every day without having to invite on idiots like Tim Montgomery or Nick Timothy or whoever else it is that's being wheeled out to pretend that they don't bear personal responsibility for the skip fire that our country's been turned into by 12 years of Tory rule. You've got no choice but to do it like that. Luckily, I don't have to, and it is just luck. So you think of Joe Lycett now whenever you see something that makes you wonder whether it's satire or reality. We're in that little interregnum now. We should probably get Theo to explain it to us, where no one's in charge. Johnson has now stepped down, and well, I'll let Theo explain it to you in a minute. And then we're going to look at something that happened on ITV yesterday morning, which I think could have come straight out of the Squid Games or indeed the Hunger Games. And I genuinely want to know what you think about it, because my early thought was that this is unbelievably awful. And my second thought was that it might be defensible. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you're in for a bit of a shock. If you do know what I'm talking about, then I can't wait to find out what you think about the issue that we're about to discuss. But now, for the second time today, you lucky, lucky, lucky listener, here is Theo Usherwood.
It is officially over. Boris Johnson, he's been to see the Queen. He's left Balmoral, and Buckingham Palace have confirmed that the Queen has accepted Boris Johnson's resignation as Prime Minister. Liz Truss still hasn't arrived at Balmoral to meet the Queen and to be asked to form a government. And so we're in this odd sort of interlude period, where effectively the Queen is in overall charge. Liz Truss has landed at Aberdeen Airport and is now making her way to the Scottish castle. And then once she's been asked to form a government, she will then officially be Prime Minister. But Boris Johnson, James, is no longer PM.
So who's in charge?
Effectively, the Queen is in charge. She
so
gets sign off.
If France invade now, what happens?
The Queen would be drafting our initial response to the invasion of France.
Fantastic. Please,
but it would last about another half an hour, because then she'd have turned over to Liz Truss.
Yeah, who would probably claim she'd been misinterpreted. Have you come up with any other statespersons?
Well, I was thinking about it. I mean, Michael Gove, of course, has said that he doesn't expect to be serving in a Liz Truss cabinet.
He always seemed to me to be one of the least comfortable loyal liars, because he told the truth about Johnson during the first leadership bid, but possibly out of self-interest rather than out of some objective commitment to the truth or integrity. Then he took a job in the cabinet and played the role of a loyal liar, while never quite having the prominence some might have expected. What was it that he did that made Johnson get rid of him?
So I can't
remember.
I think it was. If you want to
So you got
my understanding was the reason Boris Johnson got rid of him was because there was quite a long-lasting rivalry there between.
Yes,
Boris
but there was
Johnson
wasn't there a specific breaking point? Rather than didn't he do something, or so maybe not. So Hunt. I think he made his misgivings clear while 62 other members of government were resigning.
He didn't resign,
so Johnson slung him out anyway. So at that point, he obviously thought he was going to survive, didn't he? So in terms of trying to find statespersons in the talent pool available to Theresa May, we've got Jeremy Hunt, who's not tipped for a job.
No.
We've got available to Liz Truss, rather. We've got Theresa May, who's not tipped for a job and probably wouldn't take one anyway.
Unlikely.
We've got Michael Gove, who's not tipped for a job.
No. Grant Shapps was an early backer of Rishi Sunak. Came out at his campaign.
So we're having
launch.
a conversation about putative statesmen, and you've just said the words Grant Shapps. That's a mark of what we've become. That's how low the country has come.
He's got a good spreadsheet.
Gavin Williamson, could he be due a comeback?
No, he backed Rishi Sunak.
Did he?
Early doors, and was very influential, of course, in getting Rishi Sunak the requisite number of MPs.
But an hour and a half ago, you were saying that she had to unite the party by appointing people who were not necessarily part of Team Truss, whatever that means. Sounds a bit uncomfortable, doesn't it, Team Truss?
Yes, she could appoint.
Hoist by your own analysis, Theo.
No, I don't think so. I was talking more in the vein of the sort of centre right. Tobias Ellwood, she's not going to appoint Tobias Ellwood.
She's not.
I don't. He's not a name that's been mentioned.
He's not a statesman either.
But he's chairman of the Defence Select Committee.
Ian Duncan Smith.
So Sir Ian Duncan Smith.
To you,
James. I think had been hoping for a more senior position than he was going to be offered.
Is there a position senior enough for a man of such epic talents?
So I think that the chatter had been. The speculation had been that he'd been offered Leader of the House of Commons, but that wasn't. That didn't meet sort of par.
Give him Leader of the Kidderminster Carnival.
Leader of the House of Commons is an important position.
Yeah, I know. Jacob Rees-Mogg had it when he was trying to save Owen Paterson's career. That went well. So he didn't consider Leader of the House was commensurate with his opinion of himself. I think there was a bit of push, yeah. Frost's done that as well. Frost's turned down 2 jobs because he didn't think that they were suitably prestigious for a man of his epic talents.
Yes, and it would also have to be handled from the House of Lords.
Gove advised Johnson to go. That was what happened. Yeah. Yes, and so he fired him. What an absolute shower. So, I mean, it's astonishing historically. You're a little younger than me, but if you think about the talent available to a Prime Minister...
I remember sitting in the House of Commons when I started in political journalism and listening to Ken Clarke on the backbenches.
There you go.
Making the point that he thought that politics no longer had those huge figures
from either side.
From either side, who came with a much higher level of gravitas. So there we are.
There we are. Do you think you'll be back again? Taking us up to 1:15.
We very quickly, I just think we're going to be. Liz Truss is arriving in the next few moments, and then she's got about half an hour with the Queen, concluding just before the end of your show, so she'll be Prime Minister in your time, James, and then it's back to London for a speech inside, we think it's going to be inside Downing Street because of the weather, because there are thunderstorms, and then she'll be making the key appointments, formalising the key appointments during the latter part of this evening.
Thank you very much, Theo. Do you still get excited about it? Because I asked at 10 o'clock this morning, when does dog bite man? When does man bite dog become dog bite man? When does something become so commonplace?
These are so regular.
It's like comes around earlier every year, doesn't it? They pick a new Prime Minister day. But you still, I mean, you can't be as excited about this as you were by 2015, for example.
That was a surprise.
Yeah, exactly. There was also a general election, so that's a bad example. So what about Theresa May's first round? That was quite exciting as well.
2017 general election was very exciting because...
But I'm not looking at general elections. Sorry. I'm looking at baton passing. So you've got 2016.
2017, do you remember 2017 and Theresa May? And you were on air, and then suddenly this came through. We had Gove suddenly stabbing Boris Johnson proverbially.
That was 16.
That was 16. Yeah,
post-Cameron, straight after the referendum.
And you thought Boris Johnson was going to be the front runner. He stood in that hotel.
That's right. Yeah.
And he was literally about to start his campaign, and then realised he had to give a speech which said that he couldn't be him.
I never fully understood why being abandoned by Gove did for him so completely.
The numbers.
Because he took people with him.
He literally couldn't get the numbers, so he didn't want to fall out.
And that little Nadine Dorries sitting in the front row burst into tears at that point, which was interesting. That was pretty special. We enjoyed that one. But what came after that? Then Johnson took over from May.
Yes.
That seems marginal. That was less exciting than.
Well, we knew the result.
It was a foregone conclusion. I'm thinking more about the bit we're in now, the cabinet appointments. I mean, I can't even remember now. How shocked were we when Priti Patel was put in the Home Office?
Not particularly shocked.
No.
I think what's different this time is that we know the appointments much earlier. We've been a much clearer steer because Liz Truss does not want there to be any sort of lag where she is seen to suddenly, James, no breakfast. My tummy rumbling.
Did you hear that, Keith? Did you hear that, mate? You've got to have a brunch bar or something.
Sorry.
So I normally do that, but I thought I was the king of belly rumbles live on air because I survive on green tea and turmeric shots. Anyway, sorry, that's very unprofessional.
There hasn't been the time. Liz Truss's team have been too aware there isn't the time to have that sort of lag.
No,
where there can be huge amounts of speculation and Westminster can reach fever pitch about who she's going to appoint to any particular role because she knows that going into this job she has very limited amount of time. She has very limited amount of capital with the Conservative backbenchers, and she needs to get on with it.
This is it, isn't it? It's almost like the monkey's paw. Are you familiar with the monkey's paw, the W.W. Jacobs play? It's brilliant and it's dark. It's almost gothic, but there's a monkey's paw that a major has brought back from India, and they're sitting around a coal fire telling stories. And it's cursed. It gives you 3 wishes, but every wish is cursed. So without... Is that your tummy again? Without doing any spoilers on this, the family take the paw off the old major and they think he's a silly old sausage, and the son of the family makes a wish and every wish comes true, but as it comes true, it actually delivers an untold tragedy. So it's almost like the motherlode of be careful what you wish for. I think Liz Truss may have wished upon a monkey's paw to be Prime Minister. But she's always going to be on the honours board, isn't she?
Yes, I think it's for most politicians to make it to the office of number 10 and to be Prime Minister is the ultimate goal. Regardless.
You'd think the ultimate goal would be to do good for Queen and country, but it's not. It's ambition writ large. I need your help with something. There's a clip here of an MP. I don't know who it is. Should we do it during should we go to the junction and then Theo can have a look at this, or should we do it live on air? Because I'm bringing him closer to my microphone in the hope that his stomach erupts again. That's not really what you tune in for.
So do you want to pop round?
Yeah, have a little look. Well, it's 12:17. 20 minutes after 12 is the time. There is a Conservative MP in Select Committee this morning berating the chairman of the BBC for a choice of guest on one of their programmes. No prizes for guessing which guest and which programme. But if you think I exaggerate when I warn you about what this lot would like to do, then that's a really helpful piece of evidence. Politicians thinking they should be somehow dictating what guests broadcasters have on. And of course it's only broadcasters that are truly independent. If you've just been set up by a non-dom billionaire and staffed with various misfits and rejects from other stations, then they absolutely love you because you're never going to criticise Boris Johnson or Liz Truss or Brexit or any of the disasters inflicted upon this country by the kind of non-dom billionaires who've got enough money to set up their own TV stations. Not mentioning any names, Rupert Murdoch. But now in Select Committee, a bloke called Steve Brine, I'll play it to you shortly, actually daring to comment on what guests the public broadcaster in this country should invite onto its programmes. Absolutely incredible. But that's the direction of traffic. And the worse things get, the worse this kind of behaviour will become. The more important it becomes to try to control the medium, never mind the message. So I'll probably play you that shortly. It makes me nostalgic for the time that Nadine Dorries libelled me in a Select Committee, which unfortunately is not actionable behaviour because parliamentary privilege, I am informed by my counsel, parliamentary privilege extends to Select Committees. But there you go. This is a woman who railed against unelected bureaucrats who's about to take a seat in the House of Lords. So I don't think you can expect consistency, integrity or any semblance of honesty from a character like that. 21 minutes after 12 is the time. So something happened on the telly yesterday, which is currently being repeated on Russian state television as evidence of how screwed this country has become. I use that word advisedly. They are using it on Russian state television to show what a mess we are in. Now, it's linked to energy bills and the looming increase in energy bills, which Liz Truss, I think, is going to have to do something about. Whether she does the right thing or the wrong thing, we'll find out shortly, or at least we'll hear one expert voice on it about 12:45 when I'm joined by Richard Murphy, one of the, I think, most compelling voices on matters fiscal, particularly on these sort of areas. We'll speak to him in about half an hour, a bit less actually. But the idea of energy bills is now looming large over the country. The knowledge of what people are likely to be expected to pay in the absence of meaningful political intervention is huge. I noticed last week the Daily Mail ran a competition with a front page advertisement to win your energy bills for a year. If the prices do get frozen, do you get the bills that you would have been paying off the Daily Mail, or do you get the bills post-freeze from the Daily Mail? This is an interesting question. And then on ITV yesterday morning, this happened. I'll play it to you shortly. And I'm going to open up the phone lines. I genuinely want to know what you think. So I've got, I say genuinely, Julian Suffolk's just to say genuinely chilling. It's Ian in Bournemouth who points out or reminds me that Russian state TV is showing these clips as evidence of how awful we are. Everyone already knows what we're talking about. Anna in Liverpool says it's despicable. It's nothing but poverty porn, using an ongoing crisis for light entertainment. How long before we have the poor fighting for food on live television? And on it goes. So let me give you some atmos. It's a wheel of fortune. You need to understand that. So the presenters, Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby, who would have had the power to say, no, let's not do this, but would not, I don't think, have come up with the idea in the first place. The relationship between producer and presenter is always interesting and rarely the same. You know, I've done projects where I had absolutely no power whatsoever to say what would and what wouldn't be going out on air. And then the polar opposite of that would be what I do now. Here, it's a large reason why I do this and very little else, because I can do more or less until they wake up and come to their senses and give me my sandwiches wrapped in my roadmap. I can do whatever I want on this programme. So I don't think the presenters necessarily deserve all of the blame for this, but I do think that they are powerful enough in that context to have said, no, let's not do this. But I just want to know what you think of it. So you've got a wheel of fortune, something upon which normally you'd have a speedboat, showing my age there. You'd have a foreign holiday, a new kitchen. On this one, ITV will pay your energy bills for a year on a big, sparkly, fairground-style wheel of fortune. This was on, is it called This Morning, this one? I think it's on when I'm on, so I'm not overly familiar with it. It's not the one that Susanna does with Adil. That's very good. This is from yesterday's television, and this is what Russian state TV are currently broadcasting to show what a mess we are in.
Okay, here we go. So we'll pay your energy bills, got £1,000 as well. So this is energy bills, I think, for 4 months if it stops on that.
Nice.
So how are your energy bills? Are you a bit worried about it all?
Major.
Yeah.
Are you?
I've got one of these prepayment meters and it's absolutely murder.
Oh, God.
Right, well, let's hope it lands on one of those then.
Whatever, you're going to win some money, so don't worry. Here we go.
One way or t'other. Here we go. Round and round it goes. Where it stops, nobody knows. £1,000 or energy bill. £1,000 or energy bill. It is going to be... It's your energy bill!
Oh, my God, thank you.
We're paying your energy bill for 4 months.
Oh, fantastic.
No worries.
Oh, what a relief. Thank you very much.
Oh, listen, well done, you.
I don't do this very often, and I haven't left a great deal of time to do it today. What do you think about that? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. I'm going to say thank you to everybody waiting to talk about Boris Johnson. I think he's delighted us for long enough. What do you think about that? I didn't even realise it was only 4 months worth of energy bills. Go on, 0345 6060 973. I'll start with Simon in Bristol, whose contribution will hopefully be scintillating enough to spare you my pontifications and ponderings on this, because it has been a rather JOB heavy show today. I do appreciate that. Simon, you picked up the phone before I'd even introduced the subject, so not only did you guess what I would be talking about, you formulated a pungent opinion on it in advance. What would you like to say?
I had a sneaking suspicion you'd be talking about it.
Yeah.
I saw it. I didn't see it live because I don't watch it. But
you're listening to the big show. You're listening to the big show, Simon, obviously.
I am listening to the big show, obviously.
Yeah.
I love the show. And I've seen it on Twitter, and I just saw it first and thought, oh, God, that's really quite ghoulish.
Yeah.
It's really horrible. It just really jarred with me. And then I thought about it. My history is, in a previous life, I used to produce breakfast shows for commercial radio stations across the UK.
Oh, yeah.
And I sat down and thought for 5 minutes, and I thought, right, if I was still on air, and I am available.
Well played. Yes, carry on.
This is exactly what I'd be doing. I wouldn't be doing it like this. The way it was presented, I think is what jarred. It was really patronising on a sparkly Wheel of Fortune. Absolutely not. But whatever station you're on, your listeners are worried about their energy bills.
Yeah.
There's a different way to do it. There's a way of introducing it more sympathetically and saying, like, we're in the same boat as you are. We know that you're struggling.
But that's not true. You know that's not true. I couldn't sit here and say that to someone who was truly on their uppers. That is part of the reason why I don't think it is doable for Tone. You've got extremely wealthy presenters.
Oh, no, you have on This Morning, and you have on
okay, so you're talking about your radio shows. All right, I'll take that back.
On a local station where you walk past the studio on your way to work every day, where you are part of the community, you can say, we know what's going on, we want to help.
But I'm steering you back to ITV, mate. I want to know what we think about what actually happened, not what you might have done. Because I think they are two completely different propositions. You're right to draw the distinction, but we're not talking about what you're talking about. We're talking about ITV deciding to do that yesterday, and the tone of it. I hadn't listened to it properly before. I'd only watched it, but when you've got your headphones on, the tone of it was appalling, I felt.
It's disgusting. It's patronising. And I'm sure that Phil and Holly are lovely people, but they're in their ivory tower. They've got no worries about this kind of thing. And the way, if they'd done it with Denise or whoever their cuddly agony aunt is, it would have been a completely different proposition. It could have been done, but that's just distasteful.
It is. You're being good. This is quite a professional analysis about the tone being different, dependent on personnel and things like that. And there may well be something in that, but the Hunger Games vibe would have been unavoidable regardless of who was doing it, wouldn't it? And don't forget, the other point is, and I know you know this, but I've only just remembered it, you've got all the people ringing in who didn't get through as well.
Mm.
That's part of the jeopardy, isn't it? That's part of the actual...
It is.
Come and have a go at your energy. And what happens if you don't get through? Well, unlucky. You better put another jumper on. Or you could get Edwina Curry's tinfoil out and stick it behind your radiators.
There is that, but then, me speaking as a producer,
good point.
Going out to my community, I want to help, and you can't help everybody, but surely it's better to help somebody.
Than nobody. I love it, mate, and that was well up to sniff for a starting point, and I think it was good enough to spare everybody else listening yet more of my pontifications this morning, of which there has already been plenty. So after the news, your thoughts on that, I think, remarkable bit of television. 0345 6060 973. It's 12:31, and Amelia Cox has your headlines. 12:34 is the time. Spin to win your heating bill, because if you don't win, you won't be able to pay it. That, to me, is the subtext of this curious feature on ITV yesterday that makes it staggering, in my view. Although, listen, I've been involved in television programmes that ended up going to places that I think they shouldn't have gone to. So I do understand how it can happen, and if it's not being repeated, then lessons have clearly been learned. But it is, for 24 hours at least, a very, very live issue and a very, very ugly step towards something unintentional, but ugly step towards something pretty grim. 12:35 is the time. Robbie's in Chelmsford. Robbie, what do you reckon?
Morning, James.
Hello.
Love the show as usual. I thought it was horrific, ghoulish, and tone deaf, with a hint of the post-apocalyptic. It reminded me, firstly, of a sketch from the Mitchell and Webb show, where people play The Price is Right and the announcer proclaims, this is from probably 10, 15 years ago, so slightly prophetic, it's fuel, almost excitedly, and the sort of tone and the glitzy noises of the wheel.
Yeah.
It was really kind of dark, but I'd like to say, perhaps controversial, I think indirectly, given the mainstream nature of it, how unpleasant it was to watch and jarring almost, I think it's indirectly helpful. I think it makes the depth and the scale of the problem and the fact that those who we expect to look after us have not yet intervened. So having to make game shows for things that are there for survival.
It's such a tricky thing to do, isn't it? It's a bit like some chefs have had criticism for teaching people how to eat cheap. But I mean, it doesn't normalise it, the problem. It addresses the problem. That's I think, the tightrope you're walking here as well, isn't it? We'd all love to live in a place where nobody wants to win their energy bills, but we don't. We live in a place where people are not going to be able to pay their energy bills. They are going to be choosing between eating and heating. Why couldn't they just put money on the board? Why did they have to specify energy bills? And why do you think that's helpful?
Well, no, I'm completely with you. They absolutely should have put things like luxury boats, holidays, and the things.
Well, just cash, just lots of 5 different cash prizes.
Yeah, or and not being funny, more cash than perhaps £1,000 given inflation, because we need wheelbarrows of money to buy certain things potentially. But the point is, James, I think the fact that they kind of got that completely wrong, and it is so mainstream, and like it or not, I listen to pretty much LBC morning, noon and night. A lot of people don't. A lot of people don't listen to Question Time, so that is their mainstream way of getting this information.
So I like your effort. I think you're probably right up to a point. The idea that this would have helped some people who are not aware of what might be on the horizon, then become aware of what might be on the horizon. So it would have actually. I don't know that I agree with you, but it gives them a break. And what also, to be generous, you would be sitting in that production meeting, which often the presenters aren't at. And what do our viewers really care about at the moment? And you'd say cost of living, energy bills, and then, it might have seemed like quite a bright idea for a moment for someone to say, well, why don't we get that into the spin to win? Why don't we get energy bills? Because it's a reflection of the things that our viewers care about. That's defence number one. And your defence number two, is it's a way of making our viewers aware of something that they should be caring about that they may not yet be aware of.
Which I think was unintended. But the last point on it, James, which you nailed, and I just want to reiterate, 4 months. Why on earth is it 4 months? It's never not a year, surely. Even the Daily Mail, in their generosity, a year of your energy bills.
Was it a year
People
in the
would
Mail? Question
why.
I know, 4 months worth of energy bills. You say at some point, if we're going to do this, then we've got to really do it. And we're all overlooking, criticism, but the fact that you ring in and don't get through. The fact that you ring in and don't get through. Julie in Suffolk tells me, although how she knows this, I have no idea, because she texts me at least 47 times an hour on in the mid-morning slot. She says, Phil and Holly speak to people suffering from the most difficult traumas every day. That raises awareness. And Peter wants to know whether it was a premium phone number. That's quite a good question, actually. Do we know whether it was a premium phone number or not? Can we find out? I know what will happen. We'll get to the next break and they'll say, yeah, here you go. Here's the transcript. See if you can... Sam's in Norwich. Sam, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, Sam.
Sorry, that was very upbeat, I think. But it was
a welcome upbeat, because I didn't clock that you were a female Sam rather than a male Sam. So the quality of your hello took away any confusion or doubt whatsoever. I was expecting a bloke for some reason. Carry on, Sam.
Oh, I can lower my voice a bit if
that's all right. We've got enough from that from Liz Truss, I think, for anyone.
This is probably entirely too bleak, but as soon as I saw this and listened to you talk about it, it made me think of 1984 and the lottery, particularly the way that the lottery would be used as a focal point for the proles, something to look forward to. It's a normalisation of their life, which shouldn't be okay, of the fact that they obviously live in drudgery. They are not as well off as the people above them, who they also see and interact with, so they're aware of it. And the lottery was like this huge focus, and it gave them hope, and it was
it was bread and circuses, wasn't it? In a way, it was
absolutely.
I think we're being a bit unkind. It's not nothing like that scale, as you know. Gosh, I know that. But the tone or the thinking behind it. What about my defence that if we were sat around thinking, what do our viewers really care about at the moment, and we said energy bills, how can we help them pay their energy bills? How would you answer that question if not through some sort of competition? You can't help everybody pay their energy bills.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, they are appealing, obviously, as you've said, to the people who watch. And the lottery, in many ways, did appeal to the people who took part in it. It was uplifting. And so in that way, as a mechanism, it had grounds and it did work, and this too. And it's not okay, and as I think it is a normalisation of something that's going to be incredibly difficult. But it's
a reflection of our reality.
Absolutely, it is absolutely.
And if it is dropped as a feature, then that means half a dozen people who might have won their energy bills don't get the chance of winning their energy. Oh, God, that is... You said you were going to be bleak. I think that's even bleaker, isn't it?
Sorry. I apologise.
No, I mean, you can't be too... You can't not be bleak when you're discussing something that Russian state television has picked up as a propaganda win, as an illustration of what's the conditions in this country. Sam, thank you so much. 12:41 is the time. Yvette's in Toulouse. Yvette, what would you like to say?
Hello.
Bonjour.
Bonjour, ça va? Tu vas bien?
That's it now. I've got no more French words.
I didn't actually
except le facteur est dans le jardin. No one did. Well, everyone was listening to everyone was listening to me. Everyone was listening to me. You don't have to watch it live. What have you made of what you now know?
I didn't watch it live. I was flicking through Twitter and
there it was.
Scandal. There it was. So I sort of go and have a look. And I showed it to my French other half, and he sort of went, why?
Qu'est-ce que c'est que ça? He said, qu'est-ce que c'est que ça? Sorry.
It should be the government that sorted this out.
Right.
Why is it down to a game show?
Yes. God, there's a question.
That was the first thing.
Remind us what's happening in France. Remind us what's happening in France.
Okay. I have a 3-bedroom flat in the middle of Lyon. And my electricity bill last year went from €45 a month to 61.
Okay. Still quite a lot. It's a 30% rise.
It's quite a lot, but that's because we had his kids coming back and staying.
Oh, I see. So your energy usage has gone up.
An awful lot of hot water being used and so on and so forth. So, you could take that into account. But seriously, no, I mean, there's been very little increase on very much.
There's a cap, isn't there? There's a full 4% cap, I think, on one element
of
it. And we're probably getting some government action later, and it may well be that we look.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, I've got 2 daughters of adult age in the UK still, and I'm having to send them money each month for their bills.
Are you really?
Yeah. I mean, it's no skin off my nose because they're my daughters and, I do what I can to help.
That's what mums are for.
That's what mums are for. Well, they might say differently, but that's beside the point.
Never stops. No, the bank of mum and dad is never closed until it's empty.
There is a limit for all that. There is always a limit.
I hear you. What about the tone of what you heard? Because the necessity or otherwise of it is debatable. The tone of it was just awful.
Off, for me, personally, watching it, it was very much Hunger Games. This is just ridiculous.
Compete for a transplant.
We are literally going to have a lottery where instead of winning $1 million a week, hey, hello, we're going to, and I can guarantee that in the next few months, this will happen, that there will be, we'll pay your, this is they had a thing where it was 3,000 or 30,000 a month for a year or whatever it was. They're going to have the same kind of thing, but strictly for electricity bills.
Well, but they don't need
so that. I would like to say,
briefly.
The reason they did it for 4 months
is
because they know damn well that it's going to increase in 4 months' time.
Well, apparently not, and we'll find out a little bit more about that shortly. Although it won't be an untrammeled, an undilutedly optimistic analysis of what Liz Truss is reported to be about to announce. It's not like winning a holiday, says Jed. It's like winning the freedom to stay warm. It's got shades of They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Which is a famous film about marathon dancing, and people dance until they drop, like literally for days. I've got a feeling it's got Peter Fonda in it for some reason. I could have completely imagined that. And it's like competitive dancing until you drop, literally exhausted, with a big prize for the winner. And I think it was quite good during Dust Bowl America, during the Great Recession. It was quite a big deal because people were so desperate. Stevie says what that TV station and that newspaper are doing is disgusting. They do know what they're doing, James. You're being diplomatic as you always are. No criticism of you. And then a reply to that tweet. It says it's almost poverty porn. And the reply to that is, it absolutely is poverty porn, my friend. Poverty porn. I'm never quite sure what that phrase meant necessarily, but it's become a little bit clearer to me now. So those programs on TV channels where they find people who are really up against it and turn it into entertainment, often with a little subtext of mockery and abuse. I don't think there was any mockery and abuse. Well, there categorically wasn't, but it is turning poverty into entertainment. All they needed to do was just leave numbers on the board. Why put energy bills up there? 12:46 is the time. It is 12:49, and Clement Attlee's meeting with King George VI in 1945 was one of the shortest on record because they were both so shy. Apparently, Mr. Attlee opened the conversation saying, "I won the election," to which the monarch replied, "I know, I heard it on the 6 o'clock news." Theo Ushwood is here. We have a new Prime Minister.
We have a new Prime Minister. Officially, Liz Truss is confirmed Prime Minister in a circular from Buckingham Palace. She is now taken over from Boris Johnson. Formally, earlier we had a circular which said the Right Honourable Boris Johnson MP had an audience with the Queen this morning and tendered his resignation as Prime Minister and First Lord of the Treasury, which Her Majesty was graciously pleased to accept. We've now been told from Buckingham Palace that Liz Truss, after a 40-minute meeting with the Queen at Balmoral, has been asked to now form a government. She is officially this country's Prime Minister, so that interregnum, of course, is over. Liz Truss is in charge, and now she will travel back to London following that 40-minute meeting with the Queen, where she will hold a press conference, or not a press conference, a statement, I should say, even, either on the steps of Number 10 Downing Street, but there are thunderstorms forecast. Otherwise, it will be in probably the cabinet room in Number 10, and then she will get down to the business of officially appointing her cabinet.
The 56th
Prime Minister of the Queen has
ever.
Ever. Queen. No, I was going to say, but it's quite high. I mean, yes, that sounds about right.
Remarkable. And presumably the first one that's given a speech to a party conference calling for the monarchy to be abolished.
Yes, but that was as a Liberal Democrat.
It was still a party conference.
I've got opinions.
I've got opinions. No, if you don't like them, I've got others.
So yes, that might be put down as I think it was put down
unfortunate aberration
in her teenage youth.
Did you see what Tim Farron said the other day?
He said he was to blame for Liz Truss leaving the Liberal Democrats and joining the Conservatives.
More than that, he said that when he was giving advice to potential candidates, he said in jest that if you want to get ahead, join the Tories because they're in such disarray at the moment that it would be really easy to rise rapidly through the ranks. And 3 minutes later, Liz Truss joined the Tories, although he can't remember whether or not the Prime Minister was present at one of the seminars that he gave. Happy days, well done.
There we go.
There you go. What do you do now? Have some lunch, hopefully.
Yeah, I'll go and have
I'm very glad to hear it. Better late than never. 12:52 is the time. Before we talk to Richard Murphy, the Professor of Accounting Practice at Sheffield University, about what we think Liz Truss is going to do, I want to play you something that just happened in Select Committee in the House of Commons. And listen, I do a little bit of tongue-in-cheek boasting sometimes. I haven't been wrong about anything since 2016 when it comes to the political landscape. And if I have, we've all forgotten. This is bloody terrifying, this. All right? This is an MP called Steve Brine talking to the chairman of the BBC. Have a listen to this.
And then Laura Kuenssberg bringing us right up to date on Sunday. So Laura, who is a fantastic journalist, and I would say fairly unimpeachable on impartiality, actually, in knowing her, watching her, and knowing her personally.
Agreed.
But I would say that her show got off to a challenging start in terms of major appeal outside of SW1 and on this whole issue of impartiality by the Joe Lycett debacle, where he was asked on as a pundit. He did this mock applause after Liz Truss left the interview chair, was then immediately asked for his reaction, and he said she was the dregs of what they've got available and the backwash of the available MPs. Now, whatever your opinion, my colleagues around this table, whatever my opinion of people in my party, not really relevant. But for a brand new show, which really wants to get off to a good start, when you're booking a pundit to go on, Joe Lycett is not an uncontroversial figure. You talk about the conversations that go on after output. How about a conversation that goes on before output, where somebody says, you know what, new show, new start, new term, let's not book Joe, because we know what Joe's going to deliver. You see, somebody who's ungenerous to the BBC could say, you knew exactly what Joe was going to deliver, and that's why you booked him.
Two things. Number one, who the hell does he think he is? I mean, genuinely, some no-mark Tory thinking that he is qualified to advise or insist upon what guests are booked or not booked by the public broadcaster. I mean, absolutely breathtaking and deeply fascistic impulses on display there. And the second thing is, let me tell you why Steve Bryan is so upset about what happened on the BBC on Sunday morning. Steve Bryan is so upset because if he'd been booked to appear on that programme, he would have said exactly what Joe Lycett said while pretending to be a right-wing idiot. That's it. There is no more to the story than that. What are you so upset about, Stevie? Answer: that's exactly what I would have said if I'd been booked to appear on the programme. So he's probably a little bit bruised that he wasn't booked to appear on the programme, and absolutely terrified of the unavoidable realisation that if he had been, he would have said exactly what the man pretending to be a sycophantic right-wing idiot came out with. So the reason why Steve Bryan is so upset about Joe Lycett is because he's a sycophantic right-wing idiot. And the reason why he thinks the BBC shouldn't have booked Joe Lycett or broadcast that particular segment is because it made sycophantic right-wing idiots feel like sycophantic right-wing idiots. And that's the end of my TED Talk. Richard Murphy is here now for a belated and brief analysis of what we're expecting Liz Truss to do with energy bills. Richard, many thanks for your time. Frozen until 2024. The question is this the right thing to do? Where will the money come from? And what will the ramifications be? If this policy is a rock that is lobbed into the pool of the British economy, show us where the ripples will go.
Answer, I don't know, because I've seen another version in the last few minutes from Stephen Swinford saying a different plan altogether, which apparently is not going to be, as we thought earlier this morning, subsidised by a loan through the commercial banks, which was to be repaid by increases in energy prices over many years to come, but is instead going to be an energy cap at around $2,500 a year at a cost of $90 billion a year. I can confirm that looks pretty much right. And that this will be paid for out of general taxation. So I think bluntly, we have no clue what's really going to happen as yet, but something will, because she's realised the scale of the problem she faced.
Something has to. So that $90 billion will make its way from the public purse into the coffers of the energy company.
Let's be clear, this is the biggest problem with this whole plan, that what we're seeing is a subsidy to energy companies here. We're not seeing a subsidy to households. What we're actually seeing is that the profits of the energy companies will be maintained. And in effect, and let's be clear about this, from the point of view of inflation calculation, my biggest fear is that the Bank of England will continue, and the ONS will continue to think that the full price is being charged with a subsidy supplied, and therefore will calculate inflation on the big pre-subsidy cost, the consequence of that also being that they'll continue to put up interest rates. And remember, it's much more dangerous to the UK economy that interest rates go up, because I think household mortgage costs for an average mortgage could increase by £600 over the next year if the Bank of England pushes interest rates up to £4%. Now, that is the really big crisis, even bigger than this energy crisis. Either way, businesses are in deep trouble because it's not clear that they are covered by the Truss plan. I can't add them into it and make the figures stack up, so I think they're excluded from this plan. So they're in deep trouble. Public services aren't getting any extra money, so schools, hospitals, care homes and everything else are in deep trouble. And we therefore have mass unemployment, business failures going on. At the same time, we might get a subsidy of $90 billion a year. Where does that come from? Your question as good as mine. My suspicion is that she's going to discover that we have got a magic money tree after all. Yeah. It's called quantitative easing, and it's going to be back in use.
They'll print more money. So I mean, she's backtracking slightly on her no handouts pledge. It's just that the handouts are going to be making their way to some of the most well remunerated businesses in the British economy. It's going to be the energy companies that walk away with the cash. A quick word, Richard.
James,
and the banks, beg your pardon, of course. A quick word on whether or not a windfall tax, which she's also ruled out, would have been a preferable policy.
Well, actually, what we needed to change was the whole energy price structure. I've written about that, had an article in the Mirror last Friday to look at that. We could do that. The regulator in the UK could change the energy price structure and cut prices by over 40 to 50%, depending on whether it's gas or electricity as a result. They won't. They are maintaining the high prices. That's absurd. Would a windfall tax help? Yes. But at a rate of something like 90%, as was used in the Second World War, not the pathetic sort of level of 25% we're talking about now, with a massive loophole, which the current proposal has built into it.
Bringing it home, bang on time. Richard, we'll talk again. I suspect you're going to be a very busy man in the coming months. My friend Wayne in Basildon wants to know whether, whenever I interview people who've got a bookshelf behind them, how much energy do I expend trying to see whether or not they've got any copies of my own books? I'm very worried.
You've got one up there, mate.
Well, I hope so. I can't see it from here. Mind how you go. Richard Murphy, Sheffield University, economics, fiscal guru. That's it from me for a day, except to just tell you that Conservative minister that you heard, former minister there, that you heard telling the BBC who they should and shouldn't book as guests on a programme, nothing remotely fascistic about that at all. Last time he was in the news, it was after being rebuked for setting up a meeting between a pharmaceutical company he was paid £200 an hour by and the COVID-19 vaccines minister from whom they were looking to secure a little bit of business. So who wouldn't take moral guidance, or indeed any guidance of any kind whatsoever, from Steve Brine MP? Put a few quid on me having a few more words to say about him tomorrow. Here's Sheila Fogarty. Tomorrow, 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 here's Sheila Fogarty. Tomorrow.
chiều cuối thu đông lại